Hello and welcome to the Hidalgo Show. I am Rick Dehijo Benya and I am your host. And today we start a new chapter of the Hidalgo Show. We're going to start to study the law of agency. That's right, that's the law that dictates relationships between people. It's a natural law and it's very important for us to understand if we're going to live free and with liberty. Let's get into it right after this. Okay, welcome back everybody. Today we're going to be looking at a treatise on the law of agency, which includes not only a discussion of the general subject, but also special chapters concerning attorneys, auctioneers, brokers, and factors. And this is Floyd Meacham, entered into the record in Chicago by Callaghan and Company in 1889. So keep in mind, this is an old book. If you want it, you can go find it on Google Books. So you go books.google.com, a treatise on the law of agency, and it's the first hit. So you can go get it and you can follow along. It's a free book. Just download the PDF. And here it says, entered according to Act of Congress in the year 1888 by Floyd R. Meacham in the office of the Library of Congress at Washington. This is the fourth impression. So, very important. The laws of agency are going to explain some things to us that we need to be fully aware of in everything that we do. If you're going to guard your liberty, if you're going to guard yourself and your ability to serve your master, whoever it is, whether it's the state or whether it's the Lord, whoever it is, you're going to have to understand the laws of agency. So let's just follow along here. It says, to the Honorable Benjamin F. Graves. For many years, a justice of the Supreme Court of Michigan, this volume is respectfully dedicated not only as a token of the great personal regard which the author feels for him, but also as a slight recognition of the appreciation which, in common with all citizens, notice it's a lowercase c citizen, that is not you and me, that is a U.S. citizen. The capital letter C citizen is what you find in the Constitution. That's referring to one of we the people. Lowercase c citizen, you're talking about a lower class here, so be careful. In common with all citizens, feels for one who, in the course of a career extending through every grade of judicial office, from the local magistrate of his town to the chief justiceship of his state, has so unsparingly devoted the best energies of a long and honorable life to one of the highest of human pursuits, the pure and impartial administration of justice, and who now, in voluntary retirement from judicial life, is experiencing that satisfaction which must come from the consciousness of such work well done. So, somebody had some affection towards him and wrote this book with him in mind. Very important that we read the preface, because the preface is going to set us up for the importance of the book. So what here follows is the result of an earnest endeavor to make a reliable, useful, and comprehensive statement of the law of agency. This is an ancient law, folks. It's happened since Adam and Eve, including not only its general form, but certain also of its more important special forms. How far this effort has been successful, those who use the book can alone determine. The plan pursued has been to state in as clear and accurate form as possible the principles of law involved, supported by a full citation of the authorities, and to illustrate and fortify these statements by examples and quotations from leading and characteristic cases. Okay, so let's stop there for a second. We're going to find that they're going to list a lot of cases, a lot of case law in this. Now, again, be on guard, be careful. Case law is sensitive to the contract. Okay, a lot of people have contracted into the lowercase c citizenship. So when you see a determination based on contract, do not think for a moment that that applies to every person. It does not. Let's continue. Upon doubtful questions, there has been given either in the text or in the notes a more or less full presentation of the conflicting views, and the writer has endeavored to extract from them what seemed to him to be the true principle. This has involved, in many cases, an expression of his own opinion, for which he is, of course, alone responsible. So, he's warning us. He has included much of his own opinion in here. So we need to take that with a grain of salt as well. For the benefit of those to whom complete libraries are not accessible, and they embrace the great majority of the profession, he has, in many instances, made the statements of cases and the excerpts from the opinions of the courts fuller than might otherwise seem necessary. While this course has added to the size of the book, the writer hopes it has also added proportionally to its value. If he has erred in this regard, it is the error of a too abundant caution. To further increase the practical usefulness of the book, he has, at the expense of no little additional labor, given parallel references to those excellent series of reports: the American Decisions, American Reports, American State Reports, and Moke's English Reports, as well as to the various reporters and law journals. In several of the states, the law of agency has been, to a greater or less extent, reduced to the form of a code. Okay, that's the first thing you guys need to understand. They have codified the law of agency, the law of contract, the law of agreement, the law of relationship. These are all things that they have codified. Now, the problem with codifying anything involving a relationship is that you're stuck having to interpret the code. And that code interpretation is where you find all of the fallibleness of the system. The more important of these statutory provisions will be found collected in the appendix. The work is divided into 5 parts or books. Of these, the first 4 are devoted to a general exposition of the law of agency. That's where we're going to focus, okay? While the 5th contains a consideration of the law applicable to attorneys, auctioneers, brokers, and factors. That this method of treatment involves something of repetition is true. But in the writer's opinion, the advantage of consecutive and separate treatment more than compensate for it. The subjects of ship and bank officers and others sometimes treated in works upon agency have not been separately dealt with, not only because they belong more appropriately to other topics, but because the size of the work would not permit of it. Each of the 4 separate forms treated might well be, as each has begun, made the subject of an independent treatise, and to compress them into single chapters prevents exhaustive discussion. It is believed, however, that no important principle has been omitted, and that what these chapters lack will be matter which is cumulative or of detail only. Trusting that this work will be of use to those for whom it was intended, the writer submits it to the profession. Floyd Meacham. Okay, so here we have a book that's dedicated to the craft of enforcing the law, specifically to attorneys, to those who define the law. Now, the problem is there are various forms of law. In each form of law, you must take the variables and imply it or apply it. Caution, in a very cautious way. So the first thing we got to recognize is that there is a supreme law of the universe, right? That is the law of our Creator. That is the law which all of us are really ordained to follow. And these laws against these things, such as loving our neighbors ourselves, the fruits of the Spirit, against these things there can be no law. Okay? However, when man goes about trying to define God's law and place in it a penalty for man to pay some kind of a penitence for their abuse or for their transgression against the law, man at that point begins to get into murky waters. Especially when you consider who it is that's making the decisions. So as we go through this, we're going to take some caution, and we're going to very carefully dissect and discern the law of agency, the principles of the law of agency, and we are going to apply it to our relationship with Yahuwah Elohim, the God of the universe, with Yahushua HaMashiach, with the Son, okay, our King, Jesus Christ. We're going to apply these principles so that we can understand how we can fully address that agency and operate in it on this earth even now. So there's a breakdown of the definitions and divisions of the books here in book 1. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down through this, and when we get to the other side of book 1, that is the book we're going to be focusing on primarily. You're going to see that the word capacity is heavily used in this book. And the reason why the word capacity is used so much is because that is what defines what agency you're operating in. And vice versa, what agency you're operating in defines what capacity that you're working with. Okay, and then there's a table of cases that are cited. Boy, there is just tons of information here. So let's get down through these cases, and we'll find ourselves at the first book, to where we can get. Not so I don't really want to get into the cases so much as you can really find a plethora of information by looking at the cases, but you're going to find it both to the benefit and to the non-benefit. Okay, so here's the law of agency. We're in book 1 and we're on page 100. So there's a lot of table of contents here. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let me see if there's citations on this. Okay, let's go ahead and start this. Agency defined. Agency is a legal relation founded upon the express or implied contracts of the parties, or created by law, by virtue of which one party, the agent, is employed and authorized to represent the act for the other, the principal, in business dealings with third persons. The distinguishing features of the agent are his representative character and his derivative authority. Okay, so what can we take from just the definition on its own? Let's go back here. And let's look at the citation right here. Okay. Agency is founded upon contract, either express or implied, by which one of the parties confides to the other the management of some businesses to be transacted in his name or on his account, on by which the other assumes to do the business and to render an account for it. Okay, now this was cited out of one of the cases. But that is what an agency is. And an agent is a person duly authorized to act on the behalf of another, or one whose unauthorized act has been duly ratified. So that also implies that someone could be operating in an unauthorized fashion, but ratified by law to do it. Say a guardianship, that's a perfect example. Somebody who is performing a guardianship, that's unauthorized naturally. Okay, naturally that's not an authorized relationship. But by law, a guardian is appointed to take care of a minor or someone who's without capacity, and that would be duly ratified. An agent is one who acts for and in the stead of another, termed the principal, either generally or in some particular business or thing, and either after his own discretion in full or in part, or under a specific command. Okay, that's super important that we realize that, because what we're trying to learn here is that we are, as the people of Yahuwah Elohim, as the servants of our King Jesus Christ, Yahuwah, or Yeshua HaMashiach, we are applying the law of agency in this way. We have been commissioned to baptize them. Who are them? Well, it's those who would call upon the name of the Lord and want to operate in His ways. We are to baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And then we are to teach them to observe all things as the Lord has commanded. Okay? So this is Matthew 28. So if that is the case, if the Lord has commanded it, this is in fact a principle of the law of agency. Under this command, this specific command, this specific calling, let's call it a calling. You can use the word calling as well. If the Lord has called you to a specific function, and you are His agent in that specific function, what law are you under? You are under His law, because it is His agency that rules that particular situation. So it's very, very important that we start to understand these things. Now, 2. Relation to master and servant. Now, remember, this was written after slavery was abolished. Relation to master and servant. The line of demarcation between the relation of principal and agent and that of master and servant is exceedingly difficult to define. You know why? Because there's not much there. There's not much of a line at all. This difficulty arises largely from the fact that the two relations are essentially similar, and it is true. It is. Indeed, there is much reason for saying that the difference between them is one of degree only, and not of kind. The difficulty is increased by the fact that the same person often assumes to the principal many of the characteristics of both servant and agent, as well as by the fact that most of the principles which govern one relation apply equally to the other. The true distinction is to be found in the nature of the undertaking and the time and manner of its performance. Agency properly relates to transactions of business. Now think of transactions as also relationship. Don't just think of it as business. Properly relates to transactions of business or relations with third persons, and implies more or less of discretion in the agent as to the time and manner of his performance. So, how the performance is viewed in the transaction between the principal, the agent, and the third party, how the performance is viewed is very important to understanding whether it's being performed under an agency. Service, on the other hand, has reference to actions upon or about things. It deals chiefly with matters of mere manual or mechanical execution, in which the servant acts under the direction and control of the master. It may be said, perhaps, that this distinction is not altogether satisfactory in actual application, inasmuch as it is difficult to conceive of any form of service except perhaps the very lowest, in which more or less of discretion is not allowed the servant, or of any form of agency except perhaps a few forms of independent calling in which the agent is not or may not be subject to the specific control of the principal. In the majority of cases, however, and here's where opinion starts to come in. In the majority of cases, these are probably public cases, however, the distinction is sufficiently clear for practical purposes, particularly inasmuch as the same principles of law will ordinarily be applied to either relationship. And it's true. Master-servant and principal-agent are really the same thing. So when Paul says he is a bond-servant of Christ, what he is saying is that I owe a duty to Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ. I owe a duty to him, and that duty is for me to serve him all the days of my life. Bond servant. But it really is the same thing as a principal and agent. In that case, Yahushua HaMashiach is the principal and Paul is the agent. But from an earthly perspective, because Yahushua HaMashiach is reigning at the right hand of Yahuwah Elohim in heaven, and he is not present, Paul, in effect, is the principal, operating on a will, on testament, on that which he is called to do, on a command. So he becomes the principal, and those who assist him in making that calling take place are agents. Is it coming together for you? We really need to understand law of agency, because this applies to every situation in our lives. Okay? And we'll get much deeper into this as we go. So let's continue here. The term of employment as the manner of rendering compensation will, in many cases, assist in the determination of the question. So pay attention. Agents, as a rule, are employed rather as particular occasions may require than for fixed periods, and receive their compensation rather in fees and commissions than in fixed wages or salary. Did you hear that? See, this is where the distinction of fixed wages and salary and a employee came from. This is why we have such a messed up code today, because they've separated agency from employee. Okay, they're two different things. Let me say it again. Agents, as a rule, are employed rather as particular occasions may require than for fixed periods. Okay? And receive their compensation rather in fees and commissions than in fixed wages or salary. So you see already in 1889, 1888 when it was written, there was already a distinction being made between the two. That would later on, after 1913, become the tax code. And this tax code would define what wages are, what salaries are, and it would gauge them as income. While fees and commissions, agency is a whole different thing. But these considerations, while of use in many cases, are not in every instance conclusive, as the agent's term of employment may often be a definite period, and his fees or commissions may be commuted by a stated compensation or salary. Thus, the general counsel of a railroad company, employed by the year at a fixed salary and devoting to its business his entire time, is not on that account ordinarily considered a servant, nor in the day laborer who works upon his employer's farm, usually deemed to be an agent because his service is rendered as irregular intervals and at varying wages. See how they're separating agent from employee? You see the separation here? They're saying that if it's in irregular intervals and varying wages, and if it's not fixed, that most of the time, if it's not fixed, you're considered an agent of the principal. Now, that doesn't jive ecclesiastically. We are not given a time frame for which to complete the baptism of those who want to follow the ways of the Lord. We are not given a time frame to complete, to teach all people in the ways of the Lord. We're not given a time frame. We're not even given a wage cap. Okay? In fact, we're told that the laborer should be entitled to his wages. Okay? So we're given no consideration in this at all. This is where codified law starts to come in and mess things up. But you need to be aware of it, because if you're challenged, you have to be able to explain. Okay, you have to be able to verbally or on paper bring forth a proper argument. In the view that he who executes the will and is subject to the control of another is a servant, agency is but a higher form of service. While in the view that he who acts for and represents another is an agent, service is but a lower form of an agency. The two relations begin thus so closely allied, the consideration of one necessarily implies a more or less full development of the other. And while this volume is devoted to the higher form, illustrations will be freely drawn from the lower. So, hope you're starting to put it together. I want everyone to be able to live free lives at liberty, because Christ brings us liberty. He does not bring us a strict code of adherence in order to have us essentially fund a behemoth that aborts babies and does all vaccinates the religious and all the crazy things that you see going on in society today. This was not the intent of our Lord when he said subdue the earth. This is not what he intended. And in order for us to come and restore the intent of the Lord, we're going to have to understand the laws of agency. What has His agency demanded of us? So, I'm going to do one more section here. Other names employed. The names principal and agent are not the only ones used to designate the parties to this relation. The agent is sometimes called an attorney, proxy, delegate, or representative. And the person represented, though usually called the principal, is sometimes designated as employer, constituent, or chief. The contract by which this relation is created, or upon which it is based, is called a contract of agency. The right of the agent so to act for and represent the principal is termed his authority or power. And this authority or power, when conferred formally by an instrument in writing, is said to be conferred by letter of attorney, or more frequently by power of attorney. So, when we the people elect a delegate or a representative to go to a hall called Congress, this is done by power of attorney. That's what he's saying. He's saying that this is the contract of agency. He's saying that sometimes you're not called a principal. Sometimes you're called an employer. Sometimes you're called a constituent. Sometimes a chief. These are all different ways of expressing the law of agency. So, next time that you're participating in a civil situation and somebody is engaging you to do something that you know is against the ways of the Lord, you understand that you have given to them by some unimplied contract the power of attorney. And whom gives can take away. So you can always take away the power of attorney. Power of attorney is given, so it can be taken. These are all things that you should be thinking and should be clicking in your mind as the Lord begins to revolutionize our bodies and spirits and minds to bring us to a place to where we can serve Him more deeply and more honestly. We need to be awakened to these principles, to these thoughts, so that we can apply them. We can apply them well. There's also this thing called actual and ostensible agencies. An agency is sometimes said to be either actual or ostensible. An agency is actual when the agent is really employed by the principal. But an agency is ostensible when the principal intentionally or by want of ordinary care causes a third person to believe another to be his agent, who is not really employed by him. Okay, so think of scenarios where that applies. There are, that's not an ecclesiastical, no ecclesiastical agency can be ostensible. There's just no way. because the principal in this case is the Lord. And because the Lord cannot lie, that's impossible. That's only a human function. And the fifth, classes of agents. Agents are divided into a variety of classes based upon the extent or nature of their authority. And the character and obligation of these classifications is that based upon the extent of their authority into universal, general, special, and particular agents. So they've now codified separate agencies. There's universal, general, special, and particular agents based on what they're employed to do. Other classifications based upon the nature of the agency into mercantile and non-mercantile agents, or with regard to their obligation in selling into delcreder agents and agents non-delcreder, or in regard to the degree of skill required of them into gratuitous and paid agents, and professional and non-professional agents are sometimes made for convenience of treatment. So a universal agent is one authorized to transact all the business of his principal of every kind. Okay, now this would be a Christian. We are given surrogate power to do all the things that Christ did. He lived his life the way he did to show us how to do it. A general agent is an agent who is empowered to transact all of the business of his principal of a particular kind or in a particular place. And a special agent is one authorized to act only in a specific transaction. A principal can have but one universal agent. He may have a general agent in each line of his business and in each of several places. He may employ as many special agents as occasion may require. A universal agent is a very rare occurrence. That's what it says here. The great majority of the cases being those which involve some form of general or special agency. Do you know why a universal agent is of rare occurrence? Because very quickly, after Christ came and after the disciples were one at a time wiped out, we began to lose the understanding of being universal agents for Christ. And in came general governments and general corporations and vice versa. And at that point, what happened? We became subjugated by contract. Right? What's the first contract? Birth certificate. Right? What's the second contract? In many cases, it's Social Security. What's the third contract? Well, in a lot of cases, it's schooling. What's the next contract? We got driver's license. What's the next contract? You know, we got contract after contract after contract that we create agreements with the state that we will follow and obey their law. And while that is great for a society, it is a killer to the church. The church, the ecclesia, must operate at a different level, at a different capacity. We must be those who can distinguish these different agencies and understand that we have to serve the Lord in His ways, and that it is distinctly wrong to follow the ways of the world. We have to start seeing the difference between the ways of the world and the ways of the Lord. And we have to start living our lives in accordance. With that said, I'm going to end today. We'll pick up with subsection 7 when we come back. Perhaps next week, maybe later this week, I don't know, when I get time. I'd like all of you, if you would, I'm going to assign you as special agents. Each of you special agents out there that are listening, would you please say a prayer for Trinity Wrestling America? This is my universal calling. This is the calling that the Lord has put on me and given me authority to do, to restore professional wrestling to a form that's reconciled to Christ. That's what He's called me to. That's what I'm busy doing. But there are complications. We need a building. We need a place that we can have as a backup when the tent's not available due to weather. We need things to happen in order to be able to promote this and even go from our monthly cards to weekly cards in order to help those who participate in this wrestling ministry to prosper. Because these are people that are spending their time filling a role which is essential to the story that we tell. So pray for Trinity Wrestling America. Pray that the ability to expand and do the things that we want to do in accordance with the Lord will come very soon. Even before June, which is our next event. If you are supporting this channel, supporting the Hidalgo show, thank you very much. My patrons are lovely people. I love them all. They're amazing. And you guys help more than you can imagine. You motivate me to get up and do this every Monday. If you're not a patron, you want to be a patron, hey, visit my Patreon page, sign up for at least $1 a month. Let me encourage you, if you would, to sign up for $5 or more a month, and you'll get the extended content. You'll get stuff that others don't. And if you're not able to give, that's fine. Perfectly fine. You don't have to be a patron. You could also come along and just be a loyal member of our Facebook page. On social media, you can go to facebook.com/The Real Hidalgo Show. And there you'll see our page. Just like it. Come back often. Comment on the videos. Do things that help us to spread the word. Share the videos with other people that you fellowship with. Other people interested in the ways of the Lord need to know this. And if you're not on social media, you could always go to YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. Just look up Rick Dihijo Binya on YouTube and you'll see there is a channel named that. And you can find Rick Dihijo Binya. Subscribe to it, click the bell, and you'll get notified every time I upload a new video. And you can share it from there in your email with other friends and family. You help me to grow my YouTube channel, and who knows, great things can happen from there as well. With that said, I thank you all very much for joining in, listening today. It's kind of been a long episode, but I think very much worthwhile. We need to understand the law of agency. I know we do here at the Hidalgo Show, and everything I do. With that, I'm going to sign off. I appreciate all you guys listening, and please keep us in prayer. And remember, like I just said, everything, and I mean everything that I do is all about the blood.